Welcome to The Next Level, conversations that propel business. The next hour is all about the entrepreneur, why they start businesses, how they make their businesses grow, how they overcome failures and achieve success. Your host, Bob Gibbons, founder of Riata Commercial Realty, a commercial real estate advisory and tenant advocacy firm. Bob will ask probing questions to find impactful solutions that will help take your business to the next level. And now, here's Bob Gibbons.
Welcome to The Next Level, and we are here today with another great guest. Chad Kanyer is the founder of Forest. And Forest, well, I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to let him tell you. Just think of it if you're a big star, you're in the NFL, let's say, or the MLB or some other professional sports league, and you no longer are there. You've had your tribe, you've had your team, you've had everybody around you doing everything, and now they're gone. So what now? Chad has the answer. Chad, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here. Bob and Jan have been awesome bringing us on and just encouraging us in this journey as well.
Stoked. You're the first time anybody's ever used the word stoked on our show.
Well, I'm a millennial, man. You're going to hear things like that. It's just
No. That has nothing to do. When I lived in California in high school and would go surfing, stoked was a very common thing we heard back then. So.
Yeah, I'm from Seattle, so hella was used a lot. I got a lot of crap for that when I went to the East Coast and started throwing around the term hella. That's hella cool, hella smart. Got a lot of flack for that, and especially my fraternity. It was like, please stop speaking that way.
Well, so Chad, tell us, what is Forest?
Forest is an ecosystem. We harp on that a lot. We've all pulled from our former lives and kind of the wilderness seasons. We call them the difficult seasons that we've gone through, even seasons we're kind of still weathering, to pull some principles that we're now applying to the entrepreneurial realm, but we fuse into kind of the educational realm and the community realm as well. Forest is an ecosystem that gives people life as they transition into a new chapter. So for the professional athlete or the very high level athlete of any kind, right? We have Olympians in the network as well, former Olympians. It's really giving them a sense of purpose after sport, because you have a lot of athletes who, in order to get to that level, all the stars have to align, right? It's the raw talent, it's the work ethic, it's the community, it's the coach that motivated you, it's the parent that supported you, bought your first pair of cleats. There's so many elements that go into you getting to that level. And so when it's gone, when you lose your agent, when you lose your playbook, when you lose your team captain holding you accountable, when you lose your brothers or your sisters on the team, there's a real gap there that happens. There's a real identity crisis that we see a lot of athletes are going through. And so what a great way to augment that and to kind of backfill some of those more emotional but quite tangible needs than in the world of, or I should say, than with entrepreneurial opportunities, right? So there's so many commonalities between professional sports, I guess just the professional athlete mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset. And so we are illuminating those commonalities, celebrating those commonalities, and creating bridges between athletics and entrepreneurship.
Okay. And for our guests, we want you to go to forest.co. So that's the number 4, est.co. And that's the website for the company, and that'll give you a lot more. So you're basically, let's just kind of make this a little more tangible then. So let's just say somebody comes out of the NFL. They've played for 2 or 3 years, so they haven't had a long career. But correct me if I'm wrong, the average time in the NFL these days is about 3.5 years?
3.3 years, yeah.
3.3 years.
Yeah. And the statistics around kind of what happens to them after the league are staggering. 78% of them within 3 years are broke. And the divorce statistics are pretty crippling as well. So there's something happening there, and we kind of dove into this. And the story behind it is, I've worked in the startup ecosystem for about 1.5 years. I was helping early stage companies. My background's in management technology consulting. I was at PwC for a while and some other consulting firms. And I really wanted to try my hand in the entrepreneurial space. I was really unfulfilled in my former career, and I really just wanted to kind of scratch that itch. I studied entrepreneurship in college, but I never really knew how I would use it, and so was really seeking an opportunity to leverage it.
So why this?
Well, it kind of happened naturally, honestly. I look back now in the last year and a half, and I got such good exposure into the startup world, especially in Dallas. The complaints from a lot of startup founders are it's really hard to raise capital here. It's hard to raise seed stage capital here. They leave, they go to Austin, they go to Silicon, they go to New York, even though it's way more expensive to live in all those locations because they just know they can get a $300K, $400K check for seed money. There's a lot of money, as we know, in Dallas, but it's a little bit more conservative money. There's just less. It's just a different risk profile when you're talking about startups, obviously, especially early stage. So.
Right.
What I noticed, though, is a lot of the gaps were just relational and people speaking different languages. So I would talk to angel investors in Dallas, and I would say, what are some of the biggest red flags? Or what are some big things that really prompt you to kind of start your due diligence process and potentially invest? So I'm doing a lot of this homework on behalf of my clients, and I'll call them prospective clients because as a kind of more of a broker, and I'm not a formal broker, but as a more of a broker, you know, with these early stage companies, there is no deal until there is a deal, until the cash is there kind of thing. But I made it my mission to bridge that gap. And I was really curious on how we could lever up some of these early stage companies to make them more attractive. There has to be an asterisk there. And I also knew that about 70% of the 70% of the capital that they're trying to raise is usually attributed to marketing. And so I'm thinking, okay, how do we get more cost effective on marketing? And influencer marketing is huge, as we know. It's a big driver of a lot of companies' success and growth right now. And athletes have always kind of been a target there. But it kind of fell to me, honestly. I got a meeting set up with a guy named Chase Baker. He's one of my co-founders now. He played for the Vikings. He's got his own startup. It's a technology startup. His platform that he's creating with this engineering firm up in Plano captures all of your combine statistics, but on a mat. So it's really streamlined and it's affordable for high school programs. So anyway, he connected with me. He heard I could connect him to some investors in the Dallas area. We're sitting down talking, and I start asking questions about the athlete's journey, kind of the stuff we're talking about, like what does that transition look like? Because he went back and got his master's degree at SMU. He's a real bright guy. But he's like, my path is very rare. Like these guys really struggle. And he opened up about some stuff he had gone through as well. And so I just thought, well, I had kind of tested out the startup ecosystem well enough to know that there are equity opportunities available for the right people, right? For the right drivers, marketing partners, et cetera. And it'd be kind of cool for these startups to be able to go to early stage investors and say, we actually don't need $400,000. We need $200,000. And for marketing, we're going to build it around this equity partner who, by the way, happens to be really good friends with a lot of Dallas Cowboys. So don't worry about marketing. We just need tech and ops and whatever. That's an interesting pitch to an investor, you know, and it was just an idea. It was like a napkin idea, like a Southwest Airlines napkin idea that day with Chase. That was about 8 months ago, and now we're running an ecosystem with athletes. We got about 30 former pro athletes that are in our ecosystem, and we're interacting with them on a daily basis.
So let me make sure I have this right. So you're basically saying that you're taking people that are in the NFL, and because of their name, their influence, they become an equity partner in a startup company that needs that exposure, that visibility that an NFL player can bring them. And in exchange, instead of cash, that NFL player gets equity in that startup.
Yeah, that's one of the things we definitely are doing and we are definitely working on doing. It's a complex formula. You're dealing with a lot of personal style considerations there, right? With professional athletes, they are bombarded with deals all the time. So this model, especially to kind of break into this very saturated space and to be trusted in that ecosystem, it takes patience and relationship building and things like that. And it also takes kind of an innovative model. So what they love is wow, there's less risk, right? Like the only risk is to their brand, and we can manage that, right? Because we do a lot of branding stuff. So we would come alongside them, probably take equity in the deal as well. Depends on the deal, depends on the cash situation of the startup. If it's a later stage startup and we can actually offer them a cheaper monthly marketing spend instead of a ton of paid search and stuff, we can build influencer campaigns. we'll take a management fee from them. That's a lot cheaper. So it saves them money, but they're also embedding this athlete in there. And then we are the ongoing kind of strategy consulting marketing partner throughout the duration of that relationship. So the athlete gets equity, but a big thing here is holding them accountable. So athletes are all about goals and like targets and timelines. Like one ex-NFL guy we work with was like, literally, if my coach told me I didn't have to go, I never went. Like they're very rule-based and they have to be so focused with their time because they're machines, right? That anything that's not on their schedule is just not, it doesn't receive due attention. So we need to get on their schedule and we need to hold them accountable. We need to set milestones. And some of this, we'll do some earned equity type stuff as well, some convertible note type stuff as well to minimize the risk exposure for the startup as well. So there's a lot of massaging there too. I want to be clear though. So in our ecosystem right now, we have players from about, I don't know, 5 or 6 different sports. We have ex-Olympians. We have MLS. We have multiple basketball players. Some of them former. One's a WNBA. She still plays internationally. So we have good diversity. We started in the NFL. We figured, hey, if we can break into the NFL and prove this model, like the rest is kind of going to flow from there.
Right.
And it's happened really organically. Like you'll learn that the sports world is very big, but it's very small. Like everybody knows each other because it's such a select kind of elite group. Like I think there's only like 1,400 active NFL players right now. So it's a very small ecosystem.
Wow. But a lot of change every year, though.
So much change. And we're pitching a NFL alumni group right now, and there's about 18,000 former players that we would have access to if we do a deal with them. So, I mean, I've even had one of the athletes on our team say they're pack animals. Athletes are pack animals. When one agent becomes respected and trusted in the network, it's like game over. Like they'll just get recommendations because they're all about results. It's like, right. Try this protein. It works for me, right? Low calories, high protein. Like it just works. Use this protein. Use this workout regimen. This is what Reggie Bush did to run a 4.25 or whatever it is, I'm just giving like stupid examples, but that's kind of how they think. It's kind of like, okay, that formula worked for him. I trust him. I'm going to use his formula and I will have success.
Sure.
And so you can understand why that black and white mentality is sometimes difficult when they enter into a very gray space, which is startup and VC and stuff like that.
And what happens after they're done and they lose their pack, they lose their
tribe.
So, all right, we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. All right, we are back talking to Chad Kanyer of Forest, and you can check him out at 4, the number 4, that is, est.co. So, Chad, before the break, we were talking about how these athletes lose their tribe, and I can really see this being a major issue. I remember I went to boarding school in high school. So for 4 years, 2 years in Pennsylvania, 2 years in California, I would go to school in this boarding school with, all my friends are there. And my last 2 years, I was living in San Francisco. My parents were living in San Francisco. I was going to school down between Santa Cruz and Monterey. So when I would come home, I didn't know anybody in the city because my dad was in the military. We had just moved there before I went to that school. So I didn't have any established group of people that I knew in the city. Mm-hmm. And so when I would come home for the holidays or for the summer, I was basically, alone. I didn't know anybody. And so when I graduated, I was kind of depressed for a while because I'd lost all my friends. I didn't have any friends around. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of the same thing for these players, that they no longer have their support group, their friends, their coaches? Mm-hmm. I mean, they have nothing then at that point.
Yeah, a lot of them mention that. Like, it's one of the first things. And these are like big, rugged dudes, right? Like, they don't like talking about their feelings very much, but they're also, like, I played college sports and I grew up playing sports, so I know how to talk to athletes. And the cool thing about athletes is they bring so much passion. So when you can find a way to get them to start talking about what they're passionate about, they're more likely to start opening up about the negatives as well, kind of what they're going through, right? And I think if anyone's listening, like, imagine the most difficult transition period you ever went through in your life, whether it was leaving home to go to college or transitioning into the professional workforce for the first time or, getting fired from a job or whatever. Transition periods are times where relationships matter the most. Like when I look back at my transition from outside Seattle, Washington to going to school at Carnegie Mellon all the way across the country, I was very lonely and very isolated. And I wasn't going to talk about that. It was because my ego was too high. I couldn't open up about that. And I didn't even have anyone to open up about it to. And I wanted my parents to feel like I was okay, right? Because I was so far away. But I look back and like the friendships I created during that time, I still hang on to those friendships. And so those things are really important. I think that's something we really emphasize in our program is community. They just need someone to bring ideas to. They need someone to be able to kind of like open up to, because they do lose their agent. They build strong relationships with their agents. Your family, yeah, you're getting a lot of phone calls and stuff from your family when you're in the bigs, but when it's over, things probably change. You're not on TV anymore, so people aren't constantly reminded, oh yeah, he plays for the LA Rams, And so you're just not on the stage anymore. And there's an attention thing too, right? There's a little bit of an ego hit there, but at the end of the day, it comes back to relationships and community. We started this by literally just being available for guys when they're going through like decisions, right? So they're considering different business deals. One of our co-founders was at the time considering like a job offer, and he showed me the contract, and he's like, am I getting screwed here? Like they just want someone to talk to about that kind of stuff. And so we're providing a lot of the services actually that like an agent or a financial advisor would provide while they're playing. But those guys, they often lose those people when they're no longer this like blue chip athlete, because it's a lot of them are commission driven and stuff like that. Now, maybe not their financial advisors, but those kind of peter out over time. Depends on the portfolio, obviously.
Well, and if you say that 78% of them are basically broke after a few years, who needs a financial advisor at that point?
And we also think like right now everyone's visualizing like the Tyrone Crawfords and like the big names, right? But like 90% of the athletes in professional leagues, we don't know their names. We don't really notice them on the screen, but they're still on the roster. They're still making good money. The NFL league minimum is like $560,000. So they're making really good money and they're still successful individuals. But the biggest issue we see with these guys and these gals when they're done, and they admit this themselves, I'm not judging them. It's just kind of a product of like that lifestyle or that paradigm in there, is they lose their ability to think for themselves a little bit if they're not careful. So we've been on calls with athletes and their financial advisors, and the financial advisor does all the talking. And we're talking about his transition as an athlete. Like we're talking about the next 60 years of his life. And he's like, no, my FA can answer that. And I'm like, that's the problem, right? Because that guy will not always be there. So start building now, because start at least exposing yourself to concepts and all that now, because the real world is not as sweet, right?
Well, but I can understand this, though, because when you're an athlete, you want so much of what you do to be automatic. If you have to stop and think about every way, the way you run, the way you cut, the way you catch, every single thing you do on the field cannot be a very well thought out plan. It has to be automatic. You have to practice it so it becomes automatic and becomes just sort of instinct almost. Yeah. And they do the same thing in the military.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point you're trying to train these people not to think, but to act in spite of thinking.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances.
Yeah. Like I truly feel like that's why entrepreneurship is the ticket for them. And I hate using the word ticket because that's a lot of them kind of want a silver bullet. Like, give me a formula to be successful in entrepreneurship. And I'm like, I can't do it. There's just
not a one size fits all.
It's not, but that is why this is so special, because what a great way to just throw them into the fire and be there for them when they fall, because they will fall, they will fail. We've all failed. Like any entrepreneur out there, like entrepreneurship is failure. It is failure, learning, and then pretty soon you kind of figure it out. Over time, I should say, you figure it out. So what a great way to like so boldly push them into reality land, but have their back and have a community of athletes around them being like, yeah, we went through that too. Here's a lesson that can help and all that. Because they come out and they want these crystallized, static learning curriculums, and they want these like programs and all that. And a lot of them spend a lot of money and a lot of time just kind of running around loosely or going through some sort of static thing that they think there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it's like, man, this is a journey. Like you just need people around you that are just a little bit ahead of you who are going to encourage you and equip you along the way. And I cannot give you the blue pill. You have to take the red pill and go down into the rabbit hole. I'm using a Matrix reference if anyone can appreciate that. And see how far it goes down. But again, we're going to be around you when you do.
So let's talk about the ecosystem. You've used that word several times. So, you've talked about serving the athletes. You've talked about serving the startup community. So it sounds like you have a lot of constituents that you're serving in this ecosystem. So kind of sketch that out for us. What does that look like?
Yeah, so it depends on how you want to look at it. If you're a startup founder, there are some borrowed concepts from like the accelerator model, right? So we'll have something along those lines. However, we don't really feel the need to compete, right? So I've been in business for 10 years. Our co-founders, these guys, some of them worked with me in consulting at PwC. We have strong corporate backgrounds, but I wouldn't say we're qualified to run like a Y Combinator just yet, right? We're not going to blow many people out of the water. We're connections people and we're consultants too. So I think what we can really specialize is on a deal by deal basis. We connect you to the right party. We kind of control the relationship because we have to protect the startup. We have to protect the athlete. We have to protect our reputation, and we have to build a portfolio. So we stay involved throughout the whole life cycle. But I think that's actually what startups really want right now. I think a lot of people are actually nickel and diming startups right now. There are a lot of affluent young individuals from really good families and good schools and all that are paying $500, $600, $700 a month to be in some sort of incubator and accelerator program. And that's not really our model for startups. We want to keep it really affordable. And we understand that like unless a deal's going to get done, unless there's a real partner we're going to bring in, we don't really need to monetize that heavily. I mean, we need to be paid for our time over time. This is a business. But we want to make it accessible for startups because there's so many solutions out there for subsequent phase startups, right? Series A, Series B, and all that. A lot of PE firms out there. The markets are incredibly active right now, but not a lot of people are being innovative within the early stage realm. You get Rise of the Rest and some of these early stage funds. Quake Capital's doing some cool stuff. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of it's like the same borrowed model that's kind of rebranded. Okay. We're like, let's be creative about it. And when I talk to startup founders, they're like, this is so unique. That's so interesting, right? And what they like to hear is, because we could be super startup-y about it and be like, yeah, we're connectors and we take a fee and all that kind of stuff and we take equity and all that. And we kind of want to be those ongoing consultants as well. And that's where, like, when these companies mature, that's where we can pull upon our corporate backgrounds and our like technology strategy backgrounds at Southwest and PwC and Microsoft and some of these experiences. We want to leverage those things, right?
So it sounds like you're providing services to the startups by giving them advice, consulting, marketing help, and then you're also providing services to the athletes through counseling, through helping them with their finance situation, just education on how they
and I can
deal
go
with
into
business.
I can give you more detail on that.
But then the central point then of where those two come together is through you. But whenever you see the need of the startup and the need of the athlete being sort of aligned, then you introduce them and see how you can strike that deal.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan in connections, but strategic connections that make sense for everybody. Matchmaking, but you have to get people primed. So we do this all the time, right? Like before I connect you to my friend, I kind of set expectations with you, and then I set expectations with him, and then I make the connection. It's not random.
And you also have to trust both sides.
And you have to trust. You have to build a relationship, right? To know that, hey, like when we make a connection, like our reputations are on the line to some extent, right? That person's performance, their follow through, their etiquette, their acumen, all that is somewhat of a representation of you, right? And so that's why it's kind of it's kind of difficult in the startup space to be so high quality with all these connections that we're making, because quantity cannot be as important as quality, right? I'd rather make one great connection a week that ends up in a business deal than 15 that are like, okay, he's just running around introducing people. It's not high quality. So that's what we're doing at a macro scale. So the way the athletes start is they enter into our ecosystem. Right now we're on Slack. We just use a Slack channel, and we have a bunch of different channels based on like different geographies and interests and stuff like that. And we pump out daily learning content, and there's kind of themes. So like, for instance, Mondays are all about mindset. It's like, get your mind ready for this week. A lot of these athletes are plenty motivated, but sometimes it's hard for them to connect the base motivation, like, all right, rise and grind type mentality, to like business concepts and things like that. So we try to draw that connection and do some encouragement on Mondays. Tuesday, it's like Try It Tuesday. There's a lot of different things we'll do. We start with education. We move them into small, like mentorship type groups. And over time, and I know we got to take a break, over time, we kind of get them ready to actually see deals and stuff. But we want to make sure they're prepared.
Okay, cool. We'll pick that up on the other side.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty. If your office lease is going to be expiring in the next year or two, the one thing I would tell you definitely do not want to do is exercise a renewal option. Now, that may sound a little nuts when you negotiate for that renewal option. Why wouldn't you actually want to use it? Well, the reason is because while you want to have one as a reservation for your space so the landlord can't lease the space out from under you, that option may not actually work the way you want it to now. It may have made sense 5 years ago, but it doesn't today. The only thing that changes when you exercise a renewal option are the expiration date and the rent. But you may want to do other things like have another option to renew, have an option to terminate or expand. You may want to be able to expand now or have a new base year for your operating expenses. There's all kinds of things that need to be considered. So we recommend that you renegotiate, not renew. For more information, contact me, Bob Gibbons, at texastenantrep.com. That's texastenantrep.com. Okay, we are back with Chad Kanyer of Forest. So, Chad, you were talking about what you're doing for the athletes and how you have different days for different things. And I think you'd gotten up to about Wednesday. So, tell me, what was Wednesday
Carry
again?
that on. Wednesday is kind of the most educational day. So we thought, at the beginning, we thought about kind of catering to what they're looking for, which I talked about, like a static curriculum. But we started kind of seeing that there's this expectation that that's going to be like the end all be all. We want them coming back. Like the problem with that is it's kind of like a ticket and then they're gone. It's like, oh, I wonder how he's doing, right? And then, if you leave a foreign land, or if you leave your home and you go into a foreign land and someone gives you an onboarding package to that foreign land, and then you take your first few steps into that foreign land and something doesn't work out, what's the first thing you're going to do? Man, that onboarding package sucked.
Yeah, exactly.
That's garbage. You're
Can't
not
be-
going to recommend the onboarding package. But
Can't
if
be
there's an
me.
ecosystem, right? If you enter that foreign land and someone says, hey, man, I'm going to be your travel agent like for the rest of your life. Like, I got you. Bring questions, bring comments, and like, hey, there's going to be some tough stuff you have to go through. And you can always call me. Here's my cell. Text me whenever. That's completely different, right? And then he can solve issues, in the moment, right, as things come up. So we really want to take that. This is an ecosystem, right? So like visualize a forest, right? I can get real corny, by the way, on the analogy behind all this. Like
Well,
I
I'm
put my
glad you say
branding
that,
brain on, and
because
it's
we were
over.
going to talk about the name. So
Yeah, we'll talk
does
about the
come
name,
from?
but-
So it sounds like
But
you're
think
going
about
there.
a forest, right? So like the original vision behind this was every forest, if you look at it, we forget this, but it started with one seed. And in our ecosystem, seeds are startups, right? So they have an idea and they're packed with potential, but they need all the nutrients around them. Like they need strong soil. We are the soil. This ecosystem is the soil. And the soil's job is to bring all these nutrients to support the seed. So we bring in the water, and then we make sure that it's in the proper view of sunlight, right? So sunlight, those are our mentors. They have a higher vantage point. They've been around for a long time. And they're kind of shining down, and they're able to kind of draw things up closer to them. So obviously mentors turn into investors at certain points, right? And water are the athletes, right? They come from very powerful domains, right? High seas, things that a lot of us have never even we watch those things on TV. We're watching Planet Earth because it's so breathtaking, right? They've done it. They've been on that stage, but now they're reaching inland for kind of that next season, and they need something to invest into, something to pour into, if you will. And we give them those seeds, right? And then again, we're the soil bringing it all together. So if you visualize, so if you visualize all those four things, right? Those are the four components of our ecosystem: consultants, the soil; mentors, the sunlight; the seeds, startups; and water, the athletes. Those are our four groups in Forest. 4 is also the number of creation. I'm a big believer in numbers and what they mean. And then EST stands for established. We're helping all these groups in a new way get established, right? Startups get established as companies, right? Mentors establish their legacies, right? Maybe they've made a lot of money, but we help them contribute to their legacies, like how they will be remembered, right? Like what are they going to do with their money and their time? And most of our mentors are either former professional athletes who have had success in business, or 60-plus-year-old like business phenoms who just want to give back, right? Can't be a monetary thing, right? And athletes, obviously, we know what we're establishing for them. So we're excited about we always come back to this. Like whenever we have a new idea, we're like, okay, but is that an ecosystem or is that a service? Like, and you can have services within the ecosystem, but when you enter into this ecosystem, it has to be something different. Like our generation is, especially millennials, we are craving community. Like we are so hyper connected online. Like I can text or reach anybody I've ever known in my life online within 5 minutes. But depression and anxiety and all this, the statistics are staggering. They're really high. So what's missing? And it's the in-person community. It's the actual, like, I have your back, and like my motives are not selfish. So we're trying to create that here.
Interesting. So whenever you decided to do this and you had this idea, and I think you said you and Chase, your co-founder, were putting this together, where do you start? What's the first thing you do to start and make this thing happen?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of channels into advice if you're thinking about an idea, or even if you're, I think if you're a later stage startup, you'll totally, like, what I'm going to say will totally resonate with you. Just go. Like, just do it. Just start. Let me think. How do we start this? So Chase texted some of his NFL guys, and they're like, I want to meet this guy. Like, this is a great idea. I'm like, well, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for that yet. He's friends with like Cowboys, some team captains and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Let me put some thought into this. And I went home and put a quick, my consultant brain immediately got me into PowerPoint, and I started creating decks to just kind of visualize things. And I'm a very visual person. So we did not come up with a business model right away because my thinking was, it's going to change. It's going to change so much. Like, I just need to create like a minimum viable product and just start iterating and then failing and learning and getting feedback. And just really, that's why I had Chase. And we also have another former athlete, MJ McFarland. He's down in Austin as co-founders, because I just constantly bring them ideas like, what about this? What about this? So that's kind of my customer feedback loop. And it's very quick. It's a text message. What if we do this? What if we do this? And we've made changes this week that change our trajectory and all that. That's part of the journey. And if you've been around the startup ecosystem like long enough, if this is your second venture, you're like, yeah, that's just part of the process. If you're new to the entrepreneurship realm, it can really freak you out. And you're like, yeah, you can even question leadership at certain times, right? Because you're like, this is an entirely new direction. Like, this isn't what I signed up for. It's so interesting how much as humans we cling to familiarity, even if it's not working. It's crazy. It's like, no, that was my expectation. And we're going to go, okay, this pivot, this is a big deal. And I'm like, well, we don't even have anything yet. So we kind of have to pivot. Like, let's just roll with the punches here. So my advice to anyone going is just go. You're not going to do it perfect. We learned this from even like program and project management at the Fortune 100 level, right? Waterfall project management methodology is being displaced by Agile because especially the way consumers are behaving and stuff like that, they're so quick to flee and they're so interactive. They want great customer service. So instead of investing 6 months in planning something that's going to change by the time you actually start executing, invest in customer service and iterate the hell out of your product as soon as you can, right? And we learned this from Agile and lean manufacturing and all this kind of stuff. Same concept.
Interesting. So what support did you get early on from sources that surprised you?
Well, I would say source number one would be my wife, just encouraging me, right? Because it's been an interesting journey throughout startup. There's just been a lot of ambiguity, and just having my back is a big deal. And I pull on my faith a lot. Like, I really think that entrepreneurship is a modern ministry. It's kind of the way that a lot of people are going to find God, because it's all about purpose, right? So there's this huge disconnect we're seeing between what people pursue in their daily pursuits, like work-wise, money-wise, and what they do on Sundays, and not even what they do on Sundays, what they believe in and their faith, and like where they think they're going when they die, and all that kind of stuff. For me, it's all intertwined. I can't segregate faith and business, because my business requires so much faith, especially a startup business. Like, what faith do you really need when you're making $110K a year and you're just kind of bummed about having to drive another product for Microsoft? You don't really need any faith. You're frustrated, and you're not taking enough risk to rely on a different source. And so for me, that is my power source. I start every day with that. I would say vision also is, and these are power sources for me. They're not tangible. They're not people and all that. We don't have investors yet. We've funded this ourselves as a team. So I'll just go intangible. But yeah, I would say vision. I read my vision statement every morning, channel my brain for success, program. It's the law of attraction. It's definiteness of purpose. Andrew Carnegie, like, there's a million people. Napoleon Hill talks about it a lot. I mean, a million great leaders kind of have a different branding of the same concept is, you bargain for something big in life and it's gonna happen. You just have to keep pressing and you just don't stop until it's there.
So as you've talked to the athletes, as you've talked to the mentors that are part of your ecosystem, et cetera, what has been has their advice been, hey, grow the ecosystem or narrow the ecosystem? What has been their advice? Do they want you to sort of go lean, go smaller, or are they really trying to help you build out a much bigger ecosystem than you even originally envisioned?
Great question. We've had a lot of conversations about this as a team because we have people who are contributing to the ecosystem as thought leaders and stuff like that, who have had success in entrepreneurship, but they didn't play professional sports. They played high-level sports. They went through a difficult transition when they finished sports. And that is what we're talking about, right? So not everyone in our ecosystem has some strong brand that we're going to leverage for equity. A lot of these people want to build their own startups. A lot of these people want to go back to school. A lot of these people, they want to start their own sports training business, but they don't know how to create a business plan. A lot of people don't know how to set up a LinkedIn profile. So yeah, we have an equity and VC side, but we're probably not going to be doing those deals really until summer next year. And that's if all the stars align. We don't need to, right? That's a little bit of a longer term play, and it's going to be a natural byproduct of our ecosystem. But to answer your question, we've had a lot of conversations on how to handle those people who are contributing a ton. Like there's a lot of thought leadership. There's a lot of, hey, check out this link, or hey, I just did this podcast. They have their own kind of platforms, and they're big influencers, especially within their communities and stuff. And it kind of has to be case by case. I don't think that I played 2 years of football at Carnegie Mellon University. Okay. We had 93 people at our biggest home game. Okay. So my transition from sports to business happened when I stepped onto campus. So I started studying business at a top, 25 school or whatever. But people like me don't need to be on this ecosystem ultimately. So it's going to be kind of case by case, but we have a guy that went to D1 AA school who has his own business helping athletes through transition. And I say to him yesterday, I'm like, why don't you just build that here? Like, why? I don't need to compete with you. I love what you're doing. We have the same heart for our business. Just enter our ecosystem and provide value. We'll figure out the money and the sharing and all that kind of stuff later. But like, you have a home now. And he almost cried. Because, people, we're all doing the same thing. So, but yeah, we need to draw a stark contrast between groups like Athlete Network and stuff where they're like job boards for college athletes. We need to pick our niche.
Yeah.
Right? So entrepreneurship training specifically for former professional athletes.
All right, we're going to take one last break. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back with Chad Kanyer from Forest, and you can check them out at the number 4est.co. Just C-O, no M on the end, just C-O. Put an M on the end, you never know where you're going to end up.
Oh, yeah, don't go there.
All right, so one question I have for you what is your marketing strategy as you build Forest?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have this duality in our messaging that is, you're welcome here, but there's an exclusivity factor as well. So we'll do social and stuff. We have a marketing partner. But the messaging is really important. Our branding is really important. So this is all about purpose. And like, how can we invite you into an ecosystem and promise you purpose without you doing your part in that? Really, it's kind of one of those things like you get out what you put in, right? So we have different tiers of membership. We're still kind of figuring out the specifics, but there's just this general ecosystem access, webinars, a lot of really good learning, interaction, light coaching and mentoring.
So wait a minute,
And we layer
who's
on
the
top of
member?
that. Oh, the member is the athlete, sorry.
Okay, so the
Yeah.
member's the athlete, so they can sort of come into your ecosystem as a member, and there's different levels depending on what it is they feel they need.
Yeah, so they have a month of free. It's kind of a subscription model. Right? They come on and they get access to daily content like we talked about, a lot of really good learning. They're subscribed to a channel, essentially. Okay. And then we layer on additional services. So we say, hey, listen, you can keep like having all this content shoved at you, or you can get placed into a small group and talk about it. And that's really where our curriculum comes into play, right? We're asking good questions and we're training athletes to be the leaders of those groups. And so we'll start at the base membership level. You know, once every 2 weeks, you'll have a call with like 12 other people and a mentor on the call. And we're really just, it's an opportunity for you to be like, hey guys, I'm looking at this business model, or some guy came to me with an opportunity. Have you guys heard any of this? Or, hey guys, do you know anyone in Atlanta who does VC or real estate or whatever? It's just kind of more of an intimate community within a broader community, starting to kind of really push community and transparency. And the big thing is accountability. And so we'll go through goal setting exercises, and some of the other people and the other athletes will hold you accountable. We're going to do those by geography. So even if you're in Atlanta, we'll pair you with 2 other people or 3 other people who are in Atlanta, so you guys can go get coffee outside the ecosystem. We don't want to be controlling about it. This is all about providing value. So those are more intimate groups that'll at higher membership levels. And then what we'll do is we take personality assessments and like Gallup, like strengths assessments and stuff like that. We'll have partnerships there, and we're kind of working on that right now. And then we can add with the additional services, or I guess additional tiers, we can offer co-working memberships that are layered into your monthly subscription that you pay us. So we'll negotiate group rates on that. We will offer additional consulting services. If you're very interested in real estate, we can create custom education for you and bring in those partners. But we're taking a modern approach to education. So education has been changing a lot, right? We know that MBA programs are still hyper expensive, and they're trying to saturate them and streamline them. SMU has a 1-year MBA. It's still $110,000. So education needs to be more interactive. It needs to be more immersive. Why for a top MBA program that's bringing in guest lecturers when I can get that guest lecturer on a podcast and you can do direct Q&A with them and you're only paying me $400 a month? It's a completely different model of education. So we want to be thought leaders there too. And that's startup, right? We're innovating things that just we're listening to people, and we're kind of meeting the need right there. So I've jumped around a lot, but that's kind of the athlete's journey.
So, I mean, it sounds like though that, in the marketing of this, it sounds like it's primarily, at least among the athletes, a word of mouth kind of thing.
Pack animals. I mean, we've had 25 athletes directly introduced, and I have part of our fill form or whatever is like, how are you introduced? And it's always a guy who's already in our ecosystem. They trust each other. And so we can bank on that. Those are more special connections than a Facebook banner.
But you also mentioned you were connected to an alumni group for the NFL, and so are you also doing that? Are you reaching out to all the teams to make them aware that you exist? And
we haven't gone very aggressively there yet. We have relationships into the NFLPA, Players Association. It's a fragmented space. The NFL is pouring a lot of money and time. CTE, that issue has brought up a lot of it's just brought a lot of exposure to that space. And so we will say there are a ton of programs for these former NFL guys. We have literally a 62-page document of stuff. And we're going to be sharing that information to our ecosystem too, because we're, again, just provide value, right? This is a one-stop shop. However, part of our marketing strategy is through partnerships. One of the things we really want to do is we want to layer in access to our community. We want to layer that into offerings that other groups that are catering to athletes have and offer, right? We can work out the deals on the back end, but first 3 months free or first 3 lessons free or whatever. This group Forest is great. If you have entrepreneurial aspirations, we highly recommend that that you go into this group, and we can work out referral arrangements and whatnot for that. It's more organic, right? And even groups like Athlete Network, I spoke to their CEO the other day, great guy. We're just different. I mean, we're just doing different things. So he has no problem with me talking to his athletes, because athletes on his platform are going for jobs, like Fortune 500 jobs. And this is a little bit of a different demographic. These people are very entrepreneurial. They're more likely to be in sales type roles. And they're like, man, I really want to start this idea, but I just don't even know where to start. Those kind of people. So instead of competing, we can just help each other. Provide different solutions.
You say there's a lot of other organizations that are helping former athletes, but it sounds like they all have their little niche.
It's fragmented,
you're trying to bring all those together.
Yeah, we can be, and we can consolidate a lot of that. Some of it also just, a lot of former NFL guys don't take advantage of the benefits out there, and we're wondering if that's just they're not exposed to it, or maybe they're not confident enough to fill out an application, or maybe they don't know which website to go to or whatever. So if we can provide those services, then yeah.
So let me ask you, this may be kind of a sensitive question, but there is a stereotype of sort of the dumb jock that they go through college, they don't really get a real education. They really just get passed through because they're a good athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Is that real? And if so, is that complicating what you're trying to achieve for them?
Well, I'm a frat boy, right? So I was in a fraternity. I also got a 3.2 at Carnegie Mellon and played football and run the undergrad business association. So it just comes down to labels, right?
Well, but
you just can't
didn't
label a
play
whole segment.
Professional, right? So I'm talking about it. You know, the
In my
professional.
mind, I did. Come on, Bob. Come on, Mom. I had dreams. I had big dreams.
Yeah, well, if we're talking about that, I was also,
It's a
Bodie
different
Miller.
interview. That's version 2. That's
But I mean, when they get to that level, and they're actually the athlete that's at the professional level. I mean,
it's not a matter of intelligence. It's
Okay.
not. It's a matter of priorities.
so that stereotype really should be thrown out totally because these people are smart guys, smart
Case
people
by
that-
case, case by case. I've never
Like
all the
anybody
athletes
else.
we've talked to are not. They're not unintelligent. They are sometimes ignorant to realities. What I say, and I'll say this to every athlete who comes in, is sometimes there's a huge gap between competence and confidence. So it's like me going on and playing for the Seattle Seahawks, walking in there and, saying, "Hey, Russell Wilson, I deserve your job." And Russell Wilson's like, "What do you mean? I've worked my entire life for this. That's just not how it works around here." That's the biggest complaint about pro athletes coming into the business space. It's not a matter of intelligence. It's a matter of entitlement. And they've just been told they're special since they were 5 years old. And so me and you would have the same issue, I think.
Yeah.
Human pride, man.
Yeah.
And so no wonder there's a fall, right? Because pride comes before the fall when they transition. So what a great way for us to kind of cast out that ignorance with community and with education and with exposure, right? Because the more I expose an athlete to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, the more they'll be like, holy crap, these people are smart.
Yeah.
I got to put some work in here. Maybe that's what they're not getting enough of right now.
Okay. Interesting. Well, thank you for dispelling the stereotype. Stereotypes can be true at times, and they can also be terribly false. So I'm glad this is one of those false ones. So let's talk about your sort of what's coming in the future. So you mentioned the 4 points, sort of the four parts of your program. So if you would kind of quickly reiterate what those 4 things are, and then talk about sort of what comes next. How are you building out this platform? What do you see that looking like?
Yeah, right now we're going free, right? Slack's a good tool. Our 4 pillars are community, and this is kind of sequential as well. So community, coaching. Do I know them? I'm just kidding. Curriculum, content-driven curriculum. We really want to emphasize content-driven curriculum, and consulting. Connecting and consulting, right? When it's time to actually connect them into deals and stuff like that. And here I am again being hyperactive with my hands. I'm very sorry. I'm like realizing there's an issue there. And so our platform, so my vision for the platform is, I hate when I say imagine an angel list for this, right? Because then we all in our minds, we put things in a box. But imagine a platform where a startup can go on and pitch for a period of time to hundreds of former and current professional athletes. And there's crowdfunding capabilities within there. But the athletes, because they trust the ecosystem and because they've all gone through the same learning to get on to that ecosystem. So there's no entitlement there, right? There is a certain qualification period where they all have kind of earned into this fraternity of we are now eligible to see deals, invest in deals and stuff like that. And there's a lot of money there, obviously, at some point. But there's this educational component that's layered into the startup knows that, hey, it's not just like a seed funding vehicle. It's also you're going to be building a relationship with this athlete, and there's a lot of kind of ongoing management and maintenance of the relationship. So there's a lot of asterisks in there. However, the beauty of something like that is right now we just live in such a money-driven world, especially in startup land. It's like, okay, I don't care how good your idea is. How scalable is this? How much money can I make in 2 years?
Right.
What's the IRR within 2 years,
What's
right?
the
Especially for angels. What if we could change that? Like, what if we could bring companies that are all purpose-driven companies that are truly going to change the world? And it sounds kind of corny, but it's like, it's reality, right? A lot of these companies are going unfunded and unsupported. They're run by great people with great backgrounds. What if we could kind of change the dynamic? We say change the game, but by bringing in former athletes that have not only the financial capabilities to invest in these kind of deals, but we're layering in a lot of heart and community and stuff like that. That's really powerful.
Sounds like a great future. I'm really anxious to see how this develops. So listeners, please go to forest.co. That's number 4, est.co to learn more. Chad, thank you so much for being the guest today. I've really enjoyed it.
This was fun. Thank you so much.
If you want to learn more about the show, go to thenextlevelshow.com, or you can find us on podcast or on YouTube by searching The Next Level. We'll be back next week with another great guest.